Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get going here in just a second. We have a good crowd here tonight. Please, just some ground rules. No raised hands tonight. If you want to use the chat to introduce yourself to all the other Hopium people, please do. It's always a fun part of what we do here. And we'll take written Q&As in the box. Yes, Shirley, thanks for kicking it off there. I appreciate it. It's always great to see folks. I'd love to see it. And for all of you in California, Southern California, tonight, our thoughts, prayers, hopes are with you in this challenging time. My daughter's flying back out to USC tomorrow. It's going to be interesting to see. They're already canceling some activities on campus because of the smoke. I'm somehow my screen has changed sizes and I need to go figure that out before the next one. We've got a good crowd tonight. We're up to almost 500 people already. I think we have some more who will be coming in. Let me just get myself together here. Let's make a couple notes. I do have a little bit of a cold. I apologize in advance for that. And I think in general, we're all kind of just feeling a little beaten up these days, I imagine. Um, Let me just check one last thing, folks, then we'll begin. I didn't do really a formal talk tonight, but I just had a couple notes. We all get settled. You can hear Tug. Okay, I'm ready to go. Get my head back in here. Okay, you ready? 500 folks. That's good. I think we'll have more tonight coming in. So let me just get ready. Definitely have to work. Sorry about this, everybody. This is a little bit off. Not sure what happened here, but I will fix it. Okay, welcome everyone. Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. Excited that we are back together tonight. It's been a while. This is our first gathering of the new year, and we are one of the last days of the Biden presidency. Jimmy Carter will be laid to rest tomorrow, right? Or at least have his formal ceremony tomorrow here in Washington. So I'm going to speak for 15, 20 minutes, my thoughts on things, where they are, also our community. And then we'll open it up for questions and comments. No raised hands. Everything will be done through the Q&A box. And feel free to use the chat just to connect with your fellow members of the Hopium community here tonight. And let's get going. So number one, congratulations on Virginia. We had two important wins last night in Virginia. You can't take anything for granted, right? And we also here at Hopium, we take the wins when they come and we celebrate them, we build on them. It's as we've been writing and discussing, the concept of winning and losing is going to be very important in the Trump era. This is a fundamental way that he understands and sees the world. And it is going to be important that we, as much as possible, convey that he's losing and that we're winning. And this is something that I think will be essential in our struggle against him in the coming months. If we had lost either one of these seats that we held, we would have lost the majority in the center of the House in Virginia. This community played a major role in creating those majorities in both the Senate and the House. We are among the largest fundraisers and certainly among the most enthusiastic volunteers a little bit more than a year ago in the Virginia Assembly races. And the Senate races, we raised a lot over $300,000 just for 6 targeted candidates in a very short period of time. 5 of them won. They were critical to building the majority. And now Virginia will be a major part of what we do in 2025. We've already endorsed Abigail Spanberger. She is running unopposed in the Democratic primary. She will have a competitive race for governor. Both the Assembly and the House and the Senate will be up for grabs again. We need to keep building and winning as we did up until 2024. We won in 2018, 2020, 2022, across the country throughout 2023, early 2024. We need to have wins this year. And, Virginia is going to be an important part of what we do this year. So we got off at this year with a good start in the first election of the Trump era. Second of all, I just want to say that, I've been thinking a lot about why I founded Hopium. And I've been writing about that this week. That we, I began Hopium because I really felt during the 2022 cycle that we had entered a different political age and that the organization that I had run for over 25 years was sort of equipped for a different time. It was built for a different mission. And to some degree, it achieved some of those missions. And now, though, I felt like we were entering a whole new political age, and particularly around communications and the way that information flowed. And what was happening was sort of the ongoing superiority of the right in the day-to-day discourse and their ability to dictate and determine our daily discourse in the United States. We were entering a new landscape, I felt, and that we needed new tactics, new techniques, and that I needed to change. I needed to go to Substack as opposed to a think tank, and I needed to align myself with people like Midas Touch and Courier Newsroom and Resolute Square and Deep State Radio, and not just all the traditional players. If I were true to my word, I needed to innovate myself. I needed to change the way I was doing my work around this new media environment. And I will say that I think that the urgency of, one thing that's sort of my big takeaway right now is that I feel like what I wrote in that very first post was that I said, I feel like Democrats or our family don't even understand sometimes the nature of the conflict that we're in. And I really feel that right now. I have felt that very significantly over the last several years. I don't know that we really totally understand the nature of the conflict that we're really in. I think that Trump and Elon Musk and MAGA have created a new game with new rules and new pieces, and we're still playing an old game. And, this is dangerous. And I am going to be very aggressive and very loud and, in trying to wake up our slumbering family a little bit about the need for us to reimagine, reinvent, innovate around and create and let the generational wheel turn. It's not just the generational wheel. I need to come up with a better phrase about this. It's because it's not about age, it's about sensibility. It's about this willingness to go forward as opposed to hold on to old ways that aren't relevant anymore. And I think that's not age. I mean, it's more likely that young people, but hopefully as a formerly young person, I can help lead the way in this effort. I think Hopium has been a very innovative and creative place since we began almost 2 years ago. Um, but there's to me, I have sort of an overarching sense today of the sort of the sense of urgency that we have to, you know, old dogs, new tricks, right? We got to build new things and we got to do new things and we've got to stop behaving as if the system that existed 10, 20 years ago is still going to be there for us. And we have to go forward. And it's going to be scary, exciting, exhilarating, interesting, in every way. It's going to be all of that, but it will be terrible if we don't do it. Staying where we are, defending the status quo is not an option for us any longer. We need to go build this next thing together. And that's really something I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. Third is that, we all need in this age of Trump to take care of ourselves and to be there for each other. The way I'm dealing with that is that I join a gym and I have a trainer and I'm working my ass off and I'm getting physically stronger. I'm just getting stronger, more fit. I'm hopefully, I literally have a goal of becoming stronger to give myself more strength to, make it in what will be a challenging time. It's been very rewarding and I have a great trainer here in DC. young person who's teaching me a lot, kicking my ass, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm also, as you can tell from my posting on Hopium, I'm trying to read and listen more. I'm trying to read much more and listen more. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to expand my understandings as we go forward to be consistent with this notion that we need to go build this next thing. I'm bringing in new voices and new people like Ann Applebaum and Paul Krugman and others who are not major parts of what we did over the first couple of years. I bought an iPad. I'm sitting down in the chair behind me and reading more during the day, longer stories and longer pieces. It's been important. I need to get smarter. I need to regenerate. I mean, I executed a lot over the last couple of years, and I ran a think tank for a long time. I need to rejuvenate and refuel myself a little bit intellectually, and that's been rewarding. And that's going to reflect in the work that you're going to see at Hopium. In terms of the kind of content we bring, the speakers we have, it won't be as hard knuckle politics every day. It's also going to be, as if we are going to reimagine and reinvent, we've got to do it in all parts of the game, not just in terms of communications in our politics. Fourth is that Trump is already running into problems. And we that if you are a Hopium reader, you know that Mike, the way that I describe Trump is that he was the ugliest political thing that we had all ever seen. He still is. It doesn't matter that he won the election. He's still the same guy. He's still that diminished, extreme, obnoxious, ugly figure that we saw throughout the entire election. He's still somebody who committed sexual assault and is a fraudster and a serial criminal and a felon and a traitor. These things are all still true, and we cannot back off. I mean, I think one of the most critical things about what we have to do is we cannot be intimidated and bullied into accepting their frame and their understandings every day. This has been a core part of the Hopium project, from the very beginning. And Orange Man is still mentally unfit. And I think that, I wrote today a lot about madness and this concept of the way that Trump, this sort of showmanship, the performance, the idea that, he throws stuff out, chafe to sort of confuse us and look there instead of over here. I'm going to spend a lot of time. I am, I have really thought about what I'm about to say a lot over the last couple of days, and that I am not going to accept. I don't know what his madness is. I don't know what it is. Is it strategic? Is it intentional? Is he as sophisticated? Is he an impulsive idiot who doesn't know what he's doing from one day to another, which I think is a lot of it, by the way, and he's just kind of surfing and riding and throwing this stuff out there. What I have decided I'm going to do is I'm going to go into his madness. I'm going to go live in there, and I'm going to come out the other side, but I'm going to go analyze it. I'm going to pull it apart. I'm going to write about it. I'm going to, as I did today, I'm going to talk about what he's saying, particularly the things that are relevant to how they're going to affect our lives, as opposed to the more performative, ridiculous things that he does. There are things that he says and does and he talks about that are meaningful and important in his madness, in his craziness. And we have to be agile enough and capable enough to pull these things apart. And this notion that you're hearing, I think, from some Democrats on TV the last couple of days, well, he just throws this stuff out there to distract us. I don't think that's actually really true. I think that's a overly simple understanding of what he does. This stuff he's been doing with Greenland and Panama and Canada and what Musk is doing in attacking, political governments and political parties in North America and Europe and the UK, there is a real world consequence to this. This is not sort of playful and silly, and he kind of had something weird for breakfast and he's throwing stuff out. He's helping Vladimir Putin by doing all of this. This has a real world consequence. If the United States believes that it can seize territory of other places, then it creates a justification for what Putin's doing in Ukraine, right? And so this idea, I heard a very prominent and serious Democrat on television in the last 24 hours saying, I think this is all a distraction. I think that's completely wrong. I think that's a complete misunderstanding. I mean, why do we constantly ascribe innocence to him? as opposed to it's always the worst case. It's always malevolent. There isn't an innocent bone in his body. I think he's an idiot and he doesn't always know what he's doing. But what has happened, we cannot accept this performative nature of his presidency as accepted as showmanship or funny or goofy. It isn't that. It is an actual mask for the dangerous things that he's doing. It deflects, it makes things feel less serious, right? It's a game. And I think that we have to be very careful and smart about how we approach this going forward. And it's why I really like the piece that I did today, where I quoted Paul Krugman and Ann Applebaum, this amazing piece that she just posted this morning, about sort of this idea that there's this kind of wild anti-science, anti-enlightenment kind of thing pulsating through Western politics right now and throughout the world. This is really important stuff because, as she reminded us, the whole theory of the United States is a product of the Enlightenment. And if we're now starting to challenge the Enlightenment itself, we are actually undermining many of the theories that govern the creation of the United States and undergird rule of law in our democracy. I mean, these are serious matters. These aren't jokes. I mean, I keep writing about how Trump, this isn't locker room talk, right? The locker room talk was serious stuff. It wasn't a joke, right? He was talking about assaulting women and he reduced it to locker room talk. His whole strategy is to make everything locker room talk. And we can't accept that, right? Can't accept that. And I've been thinking a lot about that and about how much it's important for us to stay grounded in truth and not give in to the untruth of this new age that we're entering and this need to stay grounded and to remind ourselves the sky is blue. There are things that, where they can't dispute. And one of the things that's starting to happen is that the most important thing that's happened is that his policies that he is proposing and threatening to implement in a few weeks are already increasing interest rates in the United States. They're already raising prices for Americans. They're already causing the bond market yields to go up. They're already weakening the American economy. All of these things are actually already happening even before he's president, because there are actual real world consequences to his performative bullshit game that he plays. And we cannot accept that there isn't an actual real world, right? I mean, I talk a lot about how we can distinguish the difference between what people believe and what is true. And what is true is that his economic policies are going to increase inflation, raise prices for Americans, cut us off from the global economy, start to unwind the global system that America built after World War II. All of these things are true, whether he believes them or not. And we cannot allow him to determine, in his madness and his craziness, to determine what is true. Let me run through a couple other points. And I want to also say one thing about, well, let me get to that at the end. I'm going to make 7 now quick points and we'll get to questions. One is the election was close. We can't forget that. We won in down ballot races. We didn't win the presidency, but we won Senate races in many of these same states. This was not a blowout election. This was not a wipeout election. It was not a mandate. It was not a landslide. It was not any of these things, right? It was a very close election that we barely lost, and we have to keep that in mind. Second is that what is meaningful and important is that our coalition that we've been running on since 2006 and 2008 that yielded us the best presidential results that we'd had since the 1930s and 1940s has unraveled. And the losses that we had with young people and Hispanics are meaningful. We lost our majority. We lost our theory of the majority in this last election. We have a lot of work to do to reimagine what our next majority is and go build it. And we also must, and I wrote about this in the very first thing that I wrote for Hopium almost 2 years ago, we must take voter registration seriously. We have to launch partisan voter registration. It has to become part of what the parties do again. The parties got out of voter registration 20 years ago. It was a disastrous decision by all of us. It was done because we wanted to save money and move this kind of activity to C3s and C4s. We need to bring voter registration back into the party. A lot of these young people that we lost registered as independents, and they were registered as independents by our own people because we don't have a mechanism for registering them as Democrats. The Republicans are registering young people as Republicans. And, we have to get smarter about this. Third is, and I've written about this a lot, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I talked about it earlier. We have to move to a 24/7, 365, information setting. We have to get louder. I've talked about this and written about this more than any other part of this. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but I am worried that, and I don't worry a lot, right? We do more, worry less here. I think the information superiority that Republicans had, even with Biden in office and with $2.5 billion, is going to get worse. And I feel like right now, I don't know that the teams that are coming into taking over in Washington are really fully aware of the resources at their disposal, all the new organizations, all the new grassroots groups, all of you out around the country, the 6 million people who gave money. We have such an urgent need to reimagine our comms, as we call it in the business, that I am going to be spending a lot more time on this, and I'm going to be writing more about this. And, my background has been in policy, but it's been a lot of communications too. And there's tremendous urgency to this. Fourth is that we must win the economic argument with the Republicans. And it's about a lot more than just getting prices down. I think part of the reason we lost is that we got on the other side of opportunity for too many young people and too many Hispanic voters, that they saw Trump and Elon Musk's people who are successful making money. They could be like them and be wealthy like them and provide for their families like them. I think that we see them as oligarchs. I think a lot of young people saw them as successful. And we have to be very careful here. I don't like where we are right now. We're repeating the same narrative that Harris did that didn't work for us, which is that prices are too high and that we have a strategy to get prices down. That didn't work in the election. I don't know why we're continuing to do it. My view is we have to talk about how a prosperity agenda, an opportunity agenda, and an agenda to get prices down, and that we made a mistake during the campaign by not doing both, talking about how we're going to continue to give people a chance to not just get by, but get ahead in ways that were convincing and compelling to people, in addition to getting prices down or dealing with inflation. And remember, inflation had been largely dealt with by Joe Biden, and now prices are going up because of Donald Trump. The entire economic conversation's changed. Again, I feel like we're a step behind on this right now. Fifth is we need to start connecting to reform and renewal. This is something I wrote about a lot at Hopium. We didn't do it in the election. It was a mistake in the election. Donald Trump had became the candidate of change and reform and altering and attacking a city and a culture in Washington that people view across the country as corrupt. Even though he's the most corrupt politician in American history, somehow we got on the wrong side of this. And I think this is an area of enormous opportunity for us going forward. Sixth is that as important as getting kitchen tables issues right, we cannot let go of the freedom and democracy agenda that Kamala was so eloquently brought to us during this election. We can do both because they both matter. And we can't let our own data mystics, the mystics that I wrote about today on the right, we have our own mystics in our own party. These are the data people who go into the back room and they run these numbers and these scenarios and they come back and they tell you what to say. I'm increasingly believing that this is all bullshit and that the politicians need to take control back from the day-to-day messaging of the party from the mystics who I think got a lot wrong in this last election. One of them is we must stick with freedom and democracy. And then finally, and this is something all of you that I'm going to be talking about a lot, is that we all get too many emails from fundraisers telling us that everything is terrible. And I think, if we're worried about demobilization, if we worry that not as many Democrats voted for Kamala Harris as voted for Joe Biden, well, there was one thing, right, that we were doing during the entire general election is that we were telling Democrats that we were losing. Our Senate candidates were telling all of you that they were losing. Everyone was telling you that everything was terrible. And so why wouldn't you then walk away from that, right? And think, well, we're losing. Well, fuck this. I mean, I don't want to be on the losing team. I want to be in the winning team. And I know that the theory of the case and the fundraisers, they raise more money this way. But what I don't think has been tested by all those smart data mystics is whether or not this stuff also demobilizes people, right? That it may cause them to give money, but it may also cause them to disengage and to not participate. I think we need a big discussion about this. And I think that I tried very hard inside the Harris campaign to raise these issues during the general election. And it was a wild set of discussions. And I can talk about all this stuff now that everything is behind us. But, I warned the campaign in writing, in memos, in briefings, that these emails that they were sending out, telling everybody that we were losing was potentially demobilizing to the coalition. And, I don't know that's what happened. But I think we need to have a really big conversation about this because raising that extra $100 million out of the 2.5 billion that got raised, was it worth it given that it actually caused general freak out and panic in our family? I don't know. I mean, these are things we've got to talk about and put on the table and don't feel like there's anything that's off limits in this discussion. So let me conclude and then we'll go to questions. I think the next few months are going to be really hard. And I've said this from the very first time I spoke to you after the election. I am feeling the weight of what's about to come in a very profound way. I'm trying to keep my own sanity, to build a community and offering for you that is interesting and compelling and not depressing, right? I mean, who wants to spend all day reading about Trump's depravities and his madness? I mean, A, I don't want to write about it. B, you don't want to read about it. So what are we going to do, right? What are we going to talk about? And I think it is really important that I'm happy so far, and I'm particularly happy with Hopium over the last like few days, that I am figuring out how to build the next Hopium in dealing now with what's in front of us, not with what we had 2 years ago when I built the first iteration, Hopium 1.0. We've gotten almost 1,000 comments from you. It's been amazing. I've read many of them. I can't say I've read all of them. I read every comment, and I just want to end with this by saying that I read every comment that is made on the Hopium site. I can't respond to all of them, but I read 90%, 85%, 95%. I try to read everyone. And so I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. I understand, and all of you need to continue to weigh in every day. One of the things I think has been great in the last couple of weeks is people have been sharing articles and things they've read they felt were valuable. That's great. Keep doing that. Some of the major things I've written about have come from stuff you guys have sent. And I love that, our community, we've actually grown since the election. I was worried, I mean, this was a disappointing election. People are down. They need to take time off. I still haven't really taken enough time off, and we still need to take care of ourselves. But I just want to say that I want to thank people. I've gotten thousands and thousands of messages from all of you. That have been very affirming and powerful and meaningful to me. I wish I had enough time to respond to every single one. I can't. Someday I'll have a team of people around me that will help me manage the flow. I think of all the things I've done with Hopium, the thing that has not worked well is my ability to be responsive to you guys, in part because this thing got much bigger than I thought it was going to be. And I haven't been able to keep up with that. And I'm disappointed in that. I want you to know that I'm disappointed that I can't respond to every single message that I get from all of you, right? I try to do my best and incorporate the sensibility of what you're bringing into my writing, into my commentary. But I've also gotten stuff from you guys, and I just want to show a couple things. Number one is, I'm an old baseball guy. I don't have in front of me who sent this to me, and I really apologize. Tug McGraw was one of my heroes growing up, pitcher for the Mets. It's very possible that my dog Tug is named after him. And I just want to say I just got this in the mail from one of you, and I don't have in front of me who it was. Thank you. This really meant a lot to me. There's a little small thing, but I was a lefty pitcher. Tug McGraw was a great lefty for the Mets, the Miracle Mets, and then the '73 Mets. And so he was an important part of my life, actually, as growing up as a Mets fan in New York and Connecticut. And then I also got this thing I want to show you. Um, and I don't know if you can read it. Hold on. I want to get the lighting right. It says do more and worry less. And that was important. And I've gotten t-shirts and other things. And I just want to, I wish I had a more meaningful way to thank everybody for their sentiment, for their encouragement. And I really wasn't sure what we were going to do. And then Susan, my dear friend, just said immediate priorities. Listen, I think that I'm still waiting a little bit. I know there's an election coming up in Wisconsin, and I know we've got Virginia. I think for me, the immediate priorities is doing everything we can to knock out what I call the unacceptable four. I'm concerned that we don't really have a strategy for how to do that as a national party. I think it's something that was doable. Whether we're doing it or not, I'm an open question. I think some of you have really gotten a terrific, have found calling your senators and your House members to be meaningful, right? You're weighing in, they're listening. And as I've told you, they record all this stuff. This stuff really matters if you're a constituent, right? If you're not a constituent, they don't really care if you call in. And so those of you who are calling now have now started having your activism become calling your senators and House members. Some of you are calling daily now. I think that's terrific. All of you should be continuing to do that. And you should do it at the state level too, right? This stuff they represent you. You should be in their face about what you feel and what you think should be doing. The second thing they should be doing is we should be advocating that they advocate um, look, I think part of the core hopium thing that I wrote about yesterday, which got a very strong response, is this notion that we have to help teach our elected officials how to become information warriors and not just legislators or governors or people that govern. We have an enormous amount of unused communications capacity sitting in all of these elected officials' offices that we have to unlock, help them unlock. And I love the comments that some of you give, which is why am I calling a House member to oppose people in the Senate? Well, why are you doing it? Right? They're citizens just like you are. They happen to have much bigger platforms than you do. They should be using them to achieve the right outcomes for the country, regardless of which chamber these things are in. It's okay for House members to have opinions about things that happen in the Senate. It's okay for senators to have opinions about what happens in the House. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like, if you can have an opinion, so can your elected leaders. We have to help them understand now that for us to be competitive in the Trump era, they are going to have to be information warriors and communicators and not just legislators. This is an area that I think there is great urgency about. And I think that all of you should stay engaged with your representatives. And I'm going to interview Eric Swalwell in the next few days. We're still scheduling it, who I think has been an exemplar in is as member of Congress, as communicator, information warrior, and for us to begin to lead this conversation more inside of our family. But I do think that in the short term, Susan, the most important thing is going to be to stay focused on doing everything we can to knock out these unacceptable four, because this stuff is all going to come very quickly. As we've discussed, we're not going to have as many wins as we all want, but Matt Getz fell. We need to make as many of these people fall as possible. And then in terms of other things that we are can do and can do, I will be trying to lay out more of that. I'm still trying to navigate this new environment we're in. And I'm also I want to say this, I'm very, very conservative in recommendations that I make to all of you. Um, all of you are doing tons of things. You're involved in amazing organizations. You have lots of opportunities to do things. Here, we're going to always stay very narrow. And because I'm only going to recommend the things to you that I feel like have a really high likelihood of being successful, as opposed to quixotic endeavors. or things that are make work, right? And I think that if you go back and look at our success and the investments we made, we were very targeted in the investments we made over the last year and a half and came back with real results. And so I'm going to take my time, and when I'm ready and I feel things are, I'm not going to put a deadline on anything. I don't know what we're going to do with all these incumbent House members that we just helped elect. I generally I have a bias against supporting incumbent uh, members of Congress or legislators because I feel like they have the ability to raise their own money. They have their ability through the committees to be supported. I'd much rather our limited resources go to electing new people and helping the generational wheel turn. And because the new people, the open seat and challenger races, those people need the most help. They need the most money. They need the most volunteers. They haven't become important yet, right? And so I don't know what that means this year when there aren't so many races and we're not going to really have the full slate of open seat and challenger races to next year in the House or late this year. And second of all, I also have this bias. Like, let's just take the Ossoff race in Georgia. Yeah, I mean, look, we can endorse him and we can go out and raise him 50, $100,000. He's going to raise $20 million, $25 million. Is our contribution to that going to be really meaningful and significant? I don't know. I mean, we have to do it probably, right? A few of these incumbent races, and certainly all the people that we endorsed who won in the House, of which there were seven people who we endorsed and raised money for, are now members of Congress. They're going to all be coming back and expecting us to raise them money and to continue to be connected to our community. So I don't know that yet. I don't know. I mean, we're in a new day. I do say that finally, um, and I've been bringing the conversation about the DNC into all of you. We've got the chairs race going on. And I will say one thing, because many of you have questions about the chairs race. So let me just get into that. The DNC is 450 people. Most of the people who are DNC members are based on the state. So the chair of the party, the vice chair of the party, other Democratic leaders in the states, the governor, sometimes senators, House members. So most of the DNC, most of it is people who are on the DNC because of their relationship to the state party in each of the states. So the voters are very distributed across the country. Then there's these at-large DNC members who are appointed by the chair. And I will be honest with you, I just don't know how many there are now. I think it's somewhere around 75 to 100. And those tend to be Washington people or leaders of the party who may not be currently in the states. But one of the dynamics that you have to realize, and I ran for chair 20 years ago against Howard Dean. I went through this process. I came very close to winning. Is that most of the votes for the chair come from non-battleground states. And this is a very important dynamic to understand that, there are seven states that are, get a lot more money and get a lot more stuff than everybody else, and everybody else gets a lot less. And, this whole question about the role of the national party, the DNC, the presidential campaign, and whether we need to be running national campaigns or whether it's the responsibility of the DNC to only run in seven states and win in seven states in the presidential. This is going to be an interesting tension point in the race, right? Because we have people running who are from the battlegrounds, people that are running who are come from outside the battlegrounds. And I think that this is a really interesting, important conversation. My own view is that one of the mistakes the campaign made is that they didn't run a national campaign. They only ran in seven states. We had a long conversation with Ken Martin and Jane Klebb about this in particular in the conversations we had. That we have enough money now that we don't have to over target. We live in a time of abundance because of all of you and all the money that you give us, that we can be doing more. And for me, the national campaign needed to be starting with the 6 million donors, treating you like partners in the fight, not donors to the cause, engaging you in the information warfare every day, asking you to move ads and videos and information through all of your networks, and in having become partners in their effort to communicate to Democrats all across the country. My first memo to the campaign about that was in December of 2023. I had many, many meetings with the campaign about this. I wrote about this extensively. I wrote an entire New Republic piece that ran in February that was on the cover called Democrat Biden Needs to Reinvent How Presidential Campaigns Are Run, right? The campaign didn't do this. And I think it was a huge error. I'm just going to be really clear. I'm going to be speaking much more frankly about my interactions with that world over the last year and a half. And, I sat in meetings, I laid all this stuff out, I wrote memos, I did everything else. I was like, one of the most valuable assets we have as in the communication space is all of you. And all of you got the only communications you got from the campaign were emails asking you for more money. And it was a huge wasted opportunity for us. And this is part of the reimagination that has to happen. Donald Trump has loyal folks who amplify and send his stuff out all over the place. We still don't have an amplification sensibility in our family. You know, Future Forward, this campaign that spent the super PAC that spent $1 billion in the campaign. I never saw one of their ads ever. Not one. It wasn't emailed to me. I didn't see it on the internet. I didn't see it on Twitter. I didn't see it on Blue Sky. I didn't see it on Instagram. I never saw one ad. How do you spend $1 billion and never touch me one time, right? And so, we are still operating off of an antiquated theory of how information moves around, and it cost us. It cost us in this election terribly, right? The late breaking voters broke to Trump and the young people and Hispanics, young men in particular, and because we weren't really communicating to them and in the way that we needed to be, in the meaningful way that we needed to be. So, I think one of my big things, Susan, is that, I've talked to Ben, I've talked to Ken, I've been publishing a lot of stuff. Ben and Ken, Ben Wickler, Ken Martin, the two of the leading candidates for chair. Jane Klebb was on, who shares many of my views about these things. She's possibly going to be the ASDC chair. We'll see. I still want to learn more about that. But, there's some low-hanging fruit here about things that we can do that will make things better for us and make us more powerful. But there has to be a greater sense of urgency in our family about all of this stuff. And I don't, I feel like I spent 2.5 years. I mean, all of you know that I work, I published Hopium 7 days a week for most of the last year or so. I mean, I left it all on the playing field because I asked all of you to do it. So I felt like I had to do it too. I worked my ass off. I'm not a young guy anymore. And I worked really hard. I mean, I did from the spring of 2022 to the election, I probably did 150 briefings for grassroots groups and other groups in the evenings at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, in addition to all the Hopium stuff. I mean, there were many weeks that I did 3 briefings a week from this room to groups all around the country, meaning that I'm eating dinner at 9 o'clock or whatever, right? And not seeing my family here and so on. But it was what the moment required. I just want to believe that our elected leaders have that same sense of urgency I think that all of us brought over the last 2.5 years. And I wonder sometimes, I wonder, sometimes about whether or not, we are fighting with the level of intensity and ferocity and with the smarts and strategy and intention that the moment and in reinvention and risk taking that the moment requires. I had an old friend who became a Hopium member who said to me in a message, like, I love all the creativity of the stuff you're doing and everyone else. I mean, Substack is a very creative medium. And I think that it was one of the best comments that I got during the whole cycle, which is that we are trying to build new things here at Hopium, and I'm going to continue to do that. Yeah, Blue Sky. I mean, I'm now becoming a Blue Sky guy the way I was at Twitter. And let me go to questions. I've been babbling here, but I've been seeing stuff pop up. And yeah, I mean, Meg asked an interesting question. Look, the way that I pass information on to Democratic leaders is I write Hopium, right? It's widely read. I mean, Gavin Newsom emailed me having read the post yesterday and said he thought that was really good. I get comments from people who are our leaders all the time about stuff they read. I also talk to people on the phone and I talk to the media and I go on Lawrence O'Donnell and I do all this other stuff. And yeah, I mean, I take stuff that you guys are questions you're asking, suggestions you have, and all that gets put into the cauldron, the Hopium cauldron, right? And I mix it all up and it all comes spitting out, right? And but Hopium, we now have 170,000 people in this community, and including many of the most important Democratic activists around the country. And so the forum that I choose is to air stuff out publicly, to put stuff out there for people to chew on, to fight on. I talk to reporters all the time, right? And but I feel like Hopium itself is where my recommendations are. And then, yeah, of course, I met with a major member of Congress just a couple of days ago for an hour meeting about the future. I mean, I have those kinds of meetings all the time. I don't write about it. I don't talk about it. There's not things that I never talked about the campaign meetings I had, the discussions I had with people on the campaign or, the party committees. I can't go into that, right? I mean, I have to be able to give private counsel and advice, in order for it to be effective, when required. So I'm in the mix, right? I've been in the mix. Look, I've been in the mix on this stuff for 30 years, right? And NDN was a very influential organization in its day. And I pick my spots and I'm very content with the fact that, I'm bringing a lot of new thinking and new ideas to the marketplace publicly every day. That's one of the powers, it's why all of you, one of the things you can do is to help keep growing our community. I mean, Hopium's free. You guys, the money you give to Hopium allows it to continue to be free. I want it to be free. I want most of the content to be free, because we're Democrats, right? And there shouldn't. I don't want to move to a paywall on our content, but that requires me continuing to grow our paid membership and also our free membership. I'd like to get to 200,000 people in our community. I think we can do that in the next few months. We probably need a few more thousand paid subscribers, and I'm going to try to grow the $1,000 level, the founders members level, to help me start to hire staff and professionalize this room look better and better videos and all that stuff. That's all going to come. I mean, I think that I'm now confident that Hopium's got a secure economic footing for this year, which I just didn't know, right? I mean, after the election, which is going to give me a little bit of confidence to hire staff and to make investments in this community, together. Um, yeah, I mean, God, there's so many interesting ideas coming from people, and here, and thank you all for all that. And Bobby asked, which of the DNC candidates for chair do you favor? I'm not going to take sides in any of the races. Many of you are going to be choosing your own candidates. I want to be open and I don't need to have opinions about everything. And we're just going to stay open and bring those leaders in. We've already done interviews with, important folks. I mean, Jane and Ben and Ken and Anderson. We did a great interview with Anderson Clayton, who's now continuing to be in the middle as the Republicans try to unravel all the successes that we had in the election. Joe asked a really important question, and I think this was, it's Ken Martin and Ben Wickler, right, are two of the leaders, although a lot more people got in, and we'll start seeing all of them on Saturday, the very first, the DNC forum, 11 o'clock Saturday. It's on YouTube. You should watch YouTube. It's like watching TV, right? It will be live. I'm assuming that they did, that the chair's race will be first, but I just don't know that yet. And as soon as I get more information about that, I'll let you know. On the shadow cabinet, I want to say something about Timothy Snyder's, which I referenced yesterday or the day before. It's necessary, but it's not nearly sufficient. It's important, but what you need to think about is the shadow cabinet and the cabinet officials need to be connected to the Democratic grassroots, need to be connected to Midas Touch. We all need to be wired into what they're doing. So there's a whole of movement approach, which does not exist today. I mean, the House and Senate Democrats don't coordinate with the Democratic grassroots and all the folks. And we need to change. That's going to change because now they're the leaders, and we all need to get connected to them. But the idea of the shadow cabinet is interesting. I'm skeptical that it could ever happen in our system because I don't know that there's ever going to be one. I think it could be three or four, because the leaders of the committees that have jurisdiction will see themselves already as shadow cabinet. But it's having a single person be a shadow minister in the information environment that we're living in is going to be necessary, but wildly insufficient for what has to happen. And so we need to not look at that as a silver bullet, or it's a must have, we need to do it, but it's only one small piece of what needs to happen in my opinion. And Joe asked a question that's on everybody's mind, which is Joe Radke. Do you think door knocking has a future after what happened with the presidential election? Trump did so little of it, and look at the results. The canvassing I did from spring through election day was disappointing in terms of actual interaction with ring doorbells and dogs barking and people simply refusing to engage. I have my doubts, except for down ballot elections. Yeah, I mean, look, I think for you, those of you who work in Democratic grassroots organizations, you should be leading conversations with your supporters and your members about what they think happened and what worked and what goes forward. I'm gonna I'm gonna say this, and I thought about talking about this earlier, but I didn't, and now I will. Is that I'm having a little bit of a crisis of faith in all of this, right? And I think that when Susan asked me, well, what are we going to go do? One of the reasons I'm being hesitant about making recommendations is that I think we cannot continue to do what we were doing before. We have to change. And I don't know what that means, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't write postcards and canvas and make phone calls and all this, but and give money, but you know, it wasn't enough. And all of you worked really hard and we all busted our ass, right? Like unbelievably. Um, but we do have to recognize that unless the paid communications, the organic content, the social media, the amplification stuff I've been talking about, unless that's all happening, then this other stuff becomes diminished in import. And in essence, what I believe happened in the campaign and over the Biden presidency is that there was a massive sort of strategic communications failure to understand the nature of the conflict that we were in, the way that information was moving, the necessity of which arguments that we had to win versus ones that were, nice to have as opposed to must to haves. And as somebody who's been doing this a long time and who grew up in the TV news business and have produced primetime television shows in my lifetime, and have a producer writer background in the television news business and grew up in the media business, I don't know exactly how to recommend to all of you about what to do, right? And I wish there was a more non-snarky, non-self-interested conversation happening around this. I've been a little disappointed. I think a lot of this is going to fall to the new chair who's going to take over on February 1st, which is just a few weeks away, right? But that's a big burden for a single person or a leadership team to navigate their way through the complexity and politics of all this. But I do think that this part of the conversation that we need to have is immature right now, and all of you need to have it. It needs to happen for all of you because you have to have confidence that the money that you're giving and the time that you're spending on volunteering is worth it. And I think we have work to do here as a family to reassure all of you that the kind of guerrilla war that we all waged over the last couple of years is exactly how we should be doing it again and going forward. And I don't know that. And it's why I didn't come out of the box saying, well, we got to go win Virginia, we got to win Wisconsin. I haven't done that. And because I don't know that um I need to have greater understanding about what happened in order. And as I said to you, I mean, my recommendations to you are very conservative. I don't want to recommend anything to you that I don't feel is worth your time or money. Many of you who give money here are on fixed incomes, and I really respect the necessity of making sure that the recommendations are have a high chance, a high likelihood of success, and are not wasting money and time. I think we did that. And when I feel confident in making recommendations to you, like I did Abby Spanberger, right, I will continue to make those recommendations to you. Um, but one of the things that you can do is to help Hopium grow, because I do think that, um, and I don't often make pitches for this, right? I'm not like always out there asking you to do it, but I do think that Hopium, I'm more confident today after the last, look, I didn't take a lot of time off. I mean, unfortunately, because Elon kind of created a political stir and Trump never has a day off. He's constantly creating chaos. I think we've all been kind of having to worry a little bit more about politics the last few weeks than we thought we were going to. And, but I feel like I'm growing in my confidence that Hopium 2.0 is going to be meaningful and something worth your time, right? I mean, I have huge, it's one of the reasons I've been publishing so often and working so hard because I feel like I need to know that this is what I'm going to do over the next 2 years and that this is worth my time as well. And that this isn't me just holding on to a phantom community that is slowly going to migrate away to other places. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it was a possibility. I didn't think it was likely. I felt we had built something really meaningful and powerful here, but people are pissed off and they're angry and they're frustrated and they want to disengage. And all of you have seen it. I mean, we have people come flame me on Hopium every couple of days, which is fine, and I'm open to it as long as it's respectful and thoughtful and not people being, just dumping their shit all over the chat. And um, but I think that I'm growing in confidence that what I'm going to give you over the next 2 years is going to be meaningful and important. And it's going to be different though, right? It's going to be different. Things have changed. We need to change with it. And I'm working really hard, to be honest, to experiment. You can tell Hopium is not it feels different every day, right? Like there's not a pattern. It's not settled on a few things. And um, but I am going to talk, what I really want to do more than anything else, and this goes back to Susan's basic question, is that Susan, it's very possible that what we have to do in the next few months is we have to come to a place of understanding about what we are all going to do, right? And how we're going to do it, as opposed to rushing into things. And for us to get smarter, and for us to read more, and for us to take a step back and to challenge our assumptions and to go to places that are uncomfortable and to spend a few months kind of, yes, punching and pushing our electeds. And I think we have to keep pushing our electeds to take up more space and be louder and be in the information war. But we also have to ground ourselves, right? And you have to go through the same process that I'm going through now, which is like, what the hell am I going to do for the next 2 years? Like, where am I going to put my time? And some of you may decide that your time is better spent with your family, that you overcommitted to politics over the last 2 years and you need to take a year off and come back in early part of 2026. That's great. You got to do what you got to do, right? Like I think a lot of people left a lot on the playing field and feel very burned and tired and frustrated and angry and confused and worried. And so I'll conclude by saying this is that um, I have no regrets about anything we did and in this election. And the way that I approach Hopium every day, as I wrote today, is that there's a theory of the case, which is that part of what the Republicans and MAGA do is they pump negative sentiment into our discourse every day. They try to make us feel bad about our country, our leaders, our institutions, each other, right? And that part of our strategic response to their negative sentiment is by talking up the country and being upbeat and optimistic. That's actually not something to make us feel better. It's actually, I think, how we beat them, right? And this is really important. And because, as you all know, there are some people who feel that hopium is, irrational hope. And one of my favorite places that I follow is a soccer show called Men in Blazers. It's one of my favorite places to go hang out and escape all this stuff. And they have a mug that they often show called Hope Kills, right? Meaning that irrational hope you can get let down in sports for your team, particularly if you root for Everton and in this case. But I don't agree with that. I just want to say that I have come to in my late middle age, now whatever I am, my formerly young years, that we have to take greater responsibility for the sentiment that we put out into the world. This process of opium has changed me as a person, by the way, in my own thinking about all this, that we are too quick to anger, that we are too quick to express our frustration, externalize our anxiety out into the world, and that behavior is self-indulgent, and it's not constructive, and that part of our job here. And I showed you the piece that Anne Applebaum wrote last week about optimism, the necessity of optimism for believing that change can come for people who are fighting in very difficult circumstances around the country, around the world. That this notion of hopium, which is not hope, it's hope with a plan. It's that we don't expect things to change unless we change it, right? We don't expect elections to go our way unless we do the work. We don't expect us to be able to defeat Pete Hegseth unless we go have a plan to go defeat him. Hope can be irrational. That's not what this place is, right? That's not what hopium, in my definition of hopium, is. We go do the work to make things better. And this has been a do place. We've done a lot of amazing shit together over the last couple of years. And I want to make sure whatever this next amazing shit is that we're going to go do is that it's the right thing for this moment in this time. And I need more time. We all need more time. We're all absorbing what this Trump thing is going to be. And so, Susan, to answer your question that I've been answering for the last 25 minutes, is that now we should stay focused on the unacceptable four. We should make sure that we're healthy and strong as people, that we should be committed to a process where by the spring, that we have found our way and figured out what our path is. But I will say this to conclude, and I want to try to articulate this. Um, I think this idea that our leaders have not understood the nature of the conflict that we've been in is really, to me, as animating and grounding in my work right now than it's been since I began Hopium. It was in the very first thing I wrote, that phrase. And I think that there's an, Susan, to your question, is the urgency that I feel about what has to happen now is that we have to come to understand the nature of the conflict we're in, and we have to start making changes in how we adapt and counter and respond to the nature of the conflict that we're in. And that's really where I think a lot of my push is going to be. And that isn't necessarily giving to a candidate but I will tell you what I wrote about was that the fight for the unacceptable four was going to tell us early on whether or not we had started changing the way that we communicate. Now that the Senate and House Democrats are up against Trump and Elon, there's no Joe Biden, there's no, Biden campaign. It's them. They're going to shoulder more of the burden, the political and communications burden in fighting MAGA. How are they doing so far? They're doing okay. And we have work to do to help teach old dogs new tricks here. And that, to recognize how much everything has changed. And that's why I think this hectoring of the House and Senate offices about getting off their ass and going and fighting the unacceptable four is a way of you teaching them what they should be doing now and helping expand their imagination to understand their role differently in a loving, gentle, constructive way, right? You start all those calls by saying, congratulations, welcome back. And by the way, I want to know what you're doing to beat these four guys, right? Because they're presence in our government is a danger and threat to the national security of the United States, and to our health and safety, to our economy. And I want to know that you understand this and are going to go fight them. And that's what I've been focused on. So let me end by saying this has been a lot of fun, everybody. And I've had a great time with all of you. I've really enjoyed. This has been deeply meaningful for me. The next few months are going to be, next few years are going to be really hard. And I don't think, I think we all just have to get ready for that. We need to take the wins when they come, celebrate them, build on them. We've been doing that here. And we need to use other tactics and techniques for people who've been successful in these kinds of fights. It's why I'm bringing in new voices and new people. And I have all sorts of things I want to do with Hopium. We'll see if we can do them. But listen, we have no choice, right? We're here to fight for our families, our future, our freedoms, our democracy. That mission is still there in front of us. How we do that mission is going to change. I don't yet totally understand it, but we're going to invent it together. I'm going to read your 1,000 comments that you've given me about what we should be doing. I've read many of them, but I have to really sit down and read all of them to help inform all this. But I'm here, and we're going to go fight. And we're going to go kick their ass, and we're going to have some wins, but we're going to have a lot of losses. But when the wins come, we have to be disciplined about celebrating them. And we also, finally, I guess my final point is that we have to be kind to each other. Our family has to stick together. And there are going to be days where people in our family are going to really piss you off, and you're going to be really disappointed. You got to let it go and move on. Because if we split and we become factional in the way that we approach one another, there's no chance of victory. If they split us and divide us and pull us apart, then we're going to get our asses kicked. And so what it means is that when John Fetterman does something that really pisses you off, you're going to have to like look at it, absorb it, post it, and then you got to move on. You can't stick with it. If where you're going to spend your time is being pissed off at other Democrats, then you might as well go work for the Republicans, because it's a guarantee for how we lose this next fight. And I know that that's going to be difficult, but it's the way it has to be, right? The way that pro-democracy movements fail is when they fracture. And we've got to stick together. And it is probably I should have probably started with this as something that is also sort of, if part of what Hopium is about is developing better habits and being smarter about how we engage, one of them is that we're going to have to be very forgiving of our brothers and sisters who say and do things that we know are stupid, or they didn't really mean it, because they're just as scared and freaked out as you are and as we all are. And some of us, Bill Clinton used to have a great line, which is he would be asked about how he's going to get somebody on his side. And he described people who didn't support him, not as his opponents, but people who weren't supporting him yet. And the way that you have to think about people like John Fetterman or others in the family who you don't agree with is that they just haven't come around to where you are yet. And we have to go work on them to bring them along, right? And I know that may sound ridiculous, but it's the way it has to be. Don't spend your time fighting with other Democrats. We know who the opposition is, right? We know where we've got to stay focused. And if you allow Democrats to become the opposition, it's a guarantee of failure for us. Love you guys. Keep working hard. So proud to be in this community with all of you. We've done a lot of good, and we've got a lot more good to do together. Take care.